This is my 1978 Camaro. It's got a 383 stroker in it, and my intake gaskets are leaking, so I'm going to walk you through how to change some intake gaskets on this. So you can kind of see there in the galley there, I got an oil leak. It's coming from right between the intake and the block, which is pretty common. Something with this intake just isn't quite right. I bought it off a guy at work who had it in his car for quite a while before he blew it up, and then he switched to LS, so he no longer needed it. So I got a new Edelbrock Performer. Well, new. I bought it used. This is like the, I don't know, the go-to intake for dual planes. Did a test on Engine Masters a while back and it seemed to outperform everything else, so we're gonna throw that in there instead, see if I can get a little better seal. And I've always struggled too with being able to lock the distributor down. It's moved on me over time, and at one point it even caused me to have way too far advanced timing, and I was chasing all sorts of issues because I timed it before and I knew it was right, so that thought didn't even cross my mind. So we're gonna get into it and start tearing her down.
Change an intake on a small block Chevy, you pretty much have to take everything off the top of the motor. So you're going to take off the carburetor, all the vacuum lines, air cleaner, coolant hoses, anything like that, anything that's in your way, the wiring. On a Chevy, you have to take the distributor out because the distributor bolts through the intake manifold. On a Ford and a Mopar, I believe you do not have to because they sit through the block in the front. So probably one of the hardest parts of doing an intake gasket on a small block Chevy is the distributor. It's really easy to mess timing up on it. So if you've never done that before, I recommend when you go to take the distributor out, you take the cap off, you mark where the rotor is at, where it's pointed, and where the distributor itself is pointed. And that'll get you in a pretty good ballpark of where it needs to be when you put it back. But other than that, everything's pretty easy. It just takes a little time to unhook everything. Do your best to try not to make a big mess. So here you're watching me just take everything off. Fuel lines, carburetor, everything I mentioned before. So I will just speed it up and let you watch.
intakes off. You kind of see, for some reason, the RTV I used here on the corner pulled off onto the intake, but the rest of it stayed on this bridge. I mean, there's some on the intake still, but pretty sure that's where it was leaking. I just don't know why that happened. It's the same case in the back too. So I had an oil leak. I couldn't figure out where it was coming from. Pretty sure it was coming from the back of the intake. So I don't know. Hopefully this new intake does a little better. So now I just need to clean all the gasket surfaces up and stuff. So I'll probably do that off camera and show you guys when I'm ready. Alright, so I got the intake all cleaned up. Or the heads, I guess, is in the intake. Basically just use a scraper as a razor on it. Gets it pretty good. But then I'll probably just take a little wire wheel on a drill quick right before, and I'm gonna put some paper towels down here and just kind of clean up the surface a little bit, make it a little rough so the gasket has somewhere to grab. So all I got left before I start throwing it on is I gotta move a couple fittings off the old one onto the new one. And then I gotta get these threads out. Oh, they're loose, so it's not gonna be a big deal. A couple of them are loose. So I'm gonna start working on that. Alright, so I got the heads cleaned up real good. So now I'm gonna put these gaskets on. How I like to do it on these intakes is, for one, I'll put a little bead around the water jackets on the heads. A little bead of RTV. I do the ultra black. This does two things. It helps seal the water jackets for one, but it also keeps the intake gasket in place when you go to install them. And then these, you just go ahead and throw these away. They always leak on the intake valleys in the front and back. So first I'm going to make sure I got the right gaskets. They do look good. Yep. So these are Fel-Pro 205s, or 1205s, sorry. Just for small block Chevy. So I'm going to go ahead and put some RTV on it now. So as you can see, put a nice thick bead front and back, and I'm gonna let it sit for probably about 10 minutes. And then put the intake on. If you read the instructions on the RTV too, you're supposed to let the bolts, basically snug the bolts, let them sit for an hour, and then torque them to spec. I usually try to do that. I don't know if it actually matters. It also tells you need to wait for 24 hours before for it to set. I've heard of people using it right away, but I try to wait at least 12, 15 hours maybe. So I'm going to put the intake on, tighten it down, and I won't put this back together until tomorrow morning. So, yeah, it's been a few minutes here, so I'm going to toss the intake on. You want to do your best just to plop it on and not move it when it sits. Just like that. I'm just going to get some bolts started, get them snug, and let the RTV sit for about an hour before I torque them. Alright, so it's been about 45 minutes. Calling that good. I'm gonna torque her down. So it has not been 24 hours yet, but I have a car show early in the morning, so I'm going to try to get this as close as I can to running before I actually start it tomorrow morning. So I'm going to put everything back together, fill coolant or fill it with fluids, and then I'm going to wait till tomorrow to actually start it. So hopefully all goes smoothly and I don't have to worry about it tomorrow morning. So what's happened on this is the oil pump, I don't even know what you call that, like the tang has moved a little bit, so the distributor doesn't want to sit where it was before. So I'm at top dead center on the cap. Should be about right here. So it should want to go down all the way right now, but it won't go down. So I'm going to try to turn the engine over by hand, and hopefully that falls into place. And then I should be close on timing for there. Should get me in the ballpark anyways. So hopefully you could see that on the video, but just spun the engine over. The rotor, the tang on the oil pump lined up, and so it was able to fall down, and now I should be set. Because top dead center is approximately right there. My number one cylinder is going to be right here. So here would be 0. This is maybe 15. It's kind of where I want it. So should get us close.
So the rest of this here is just me putting everything back together. It's obviously the opposite of how it went part, so I'm just going to go ahead and skip to the next part. If you're worried about putting everything back together, I'd say take a bunch of pictures, especially if you got an older car with a bunch of vacuum lines. They can get kind of confusing. So pictures definitely help later on.
So I've been working the past couple hours on this in my truck. This had a tranny leak that I was trying to fix, so I messed with that for a while. I just filled it up with coolant. I'm gonna make sure it starts. It's kind of loud and it's late, so I'm just gonna make sure it starts so I don't have any other issues tomorrow morning. And then I gotta get all the air out of the coolant lines, and as long as the timing's close, I might leave it. I'm not racing it or anything, so I'm not too worried about it. Just as long as it starts and runs okay, it'll be fine. So give her a shot. Way too advanced. So it was still too far advanced. You could tell by how slow it was turning over. I also forgot a vacuum line, so hook that back up. All right, one more time. Much better. Should be set for tomorrow. Let's hope I don't got any leaks.